Welcome back to another episode of Life in Private Staffing. Hope you're all well and had a good couple of weeks. We've got a bit of a special episode for you today. So today we're doing something a little bit different and we're hoping it comes across okay. We're hoping you understand a lot of what we're talking about as we go through. I'll tell you in advance, it may be easier to watch this on video. If you're struggling with hearing, watch it on video because we've got a guest on today called Spencer Collins, who is a deaf candidate. He's a deaf candidate who works in the private sector, but his speech is absolutely incredible for a deaf person. So today we're doing an episode with Spencer telling us all about his journey, and I think it's going to make for a really interesting episode. So just to give a little bit of background really. Now, diversity and inclusion is a really hot topic at the moment in many workplaces, but probably many workplaces apart from the private sector. I think that the private sector think that a lot of this stuff doesn't apply to them or doesn't apply to us, or how can it possibly work having a disabled person or a deaf person or a blind person work in a private household, and you know, we're under the radar, there's no HR sort of systems in place so much so we can, you know, it's something that we don't really have to think about. And I do think about it though, and especially when you come across people like Spencer. He's really, really active on LinkedIn. That's how we know each other. And he spent 10 years working in the private sector as a house manager. So it just makes you think, doesn't it, that actually it is possible and we should be thinking about it and we should be encouraging it and we should be promoting diversity within our sector just as everybody else is in their sector. Now, to give a bit more of a background, so I'm quite familiar with the deaf community. So my mum and dad both worked at school for the deaf up in Doncaster. So I, from the age of 4, really grew up within a deaf community. We have deaf friends around the house, and kids from the school used to come, and you know, the deaf community has been a big part of my personal family's life. So I'm very sort of comfortable around deaf people, and very aware of how big the deaf community is. But I don't think a lot of people are. And I think a lot of people would immediately think, oh no, I definitely can't consider a candidate who can't hear. How is that possibly going to work? So I really wanted to bring the topic to light a little bit today and just give you all a bit of an insight really as to how it can work, and how, to be fair, it's not even really the problem of the hearing person. If you know, it's not your problem as a recruiter or your problem as a PA thinking how's this going to work. It's the problem of the deaf person as to how it's going to work. And they've been deaf their whole life, most of them. So they know how it's going to work. And if they've been doing it for 10 years, they have their processes and have their procedures and they have systems that make it work for them. So I think we need to sort of take away this sort of image in our head that, I definitely can't introduce a deaf candidate to the principal, or he's not going to get it, and actually think, well, let's just talk to this candidate and understand more about their skill base and how they communicate and how it works, because often it does work, and we're stupid to discount candidates like Spencer before even speaking with him. So really want to do our bit from Silver Swan's point of view and from my point of view to promote diversity and inclusion within the private sector, and really try and bring it to light and bring some stories to you of people who are making a real success of it, and also hats off to the employers that are giving these people a chance and benefiting from the skills these candidates are bringing to the role. As I say, Spencer is really active on LinkedIn. I've been talking to him loads. I was just intrigued by his story really way before we started thinking about the podcast. I've been talking with Spencer and we jumped on a call, and we use Google Meets, and when I talk it comes out as captions immediately for him, and so he can and he's really good at lip reading as well, so he can pretty much understand what I'm saying as I'm saying it. And then when he responds, his speech is incredible. His mum put a lot of effort and time into his speech therapy as he grew up. And as I say, I've been around deaf people my whole life. And if you're born deaf, deaf people can be quite difficult to understand their speech. But I assumed Spencer went deaf later in life. His speech is that good. So I was like, you know what? Your speech is really, really good. Let's do a podcast. Let's get you on. Let's do a podcast. We'll provide captions. If any of it's unclear, watch it on video. Watching a deaf person speak, you understand a lot more as well. And let's use this as an opportunity to tell others his story as to how he makes it work for him, what he faces on a day-to-day basis, how, what he's done with his career. And just like everybody else I got on the podcast, he's had a successful career in the private sector. So why shouldn't we be celebrating his story whilst us trying to learn something along the way? So, really keen to get into this one. And hopefully it provides a bit of an insight to those that aren't familiar with the deaf community and just opens our eyes a little bit. So what we've done, we couldn't record on Google Meet, so what we've done is we've sort of Spencer's answered a load of questions and I'm asking a load of questions, and then we're putting it all together. So I'm hoping it comes across really smooth for you and makes sense. Let's get straight into it. As I said, when I put this out, I'm going to be tagging Spencer in all of this. So if everybody, if you do want to talk to Spencer more or get to know a little bit more about him, or if you've been affected by this or you want to consider hiring a deaf person, please do reach out to him. He's the most welcoming person and the most keen person to educate others as to his disability. So let's get cracking. There's loads of things I want to be asking him. So let's get the ball rolling, Spencer. And why don't you tell us a little bit about what you were doing work-wise before you moved into the private sector?
I used to work with two major advertising agencies in London as an art director before I changed my career as a freelance with several companies.
So basically nothing to do with hospitality. I love it when people do something completely separate to hospitality and step in. We obviously see quite a lot of military personnel move into the private sector, and obviously you worked for major advertising agencies before moving into the private sector. So I love that, and it's actually really normal. It's a really sort of normal way in. People do generally fall into it, often through sort of contacts, but we'll go into it a little bit later as to how you actually got into it. So do you mind telling us a little bit more about your disability and when you went deaf, and really why your speech is so good? I'm really sort of intrigued as to how you learn to speak so well for a deaf person.
I was born deaf. My mother did all the hard work by helping me, supporting me to improve my speech. When I was a child, I went to one of the top speech therapy schools in the US, and it was John Tracy's speech therapy school. And John Tracy is Spencer Tracy, Hollywood film star, and he set up his own speech therapy school because of his experience when he was a child with Spencer Tracy.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I've heard of John Tracy Speech Therapy School before. So for those that don't know, Spencer Tracy is a famous Hollywood film actor. Had a son called John Tracy, who was born deaf. And John Tracy set up the speech therapy school because he personally wanted to learn how to speak like everybody else. So, what an investment for your mum. What a difference that must have made to your life to be sent over to the US at such a young age to learn how to speak. Because you take for granted learning to speak. It's not just learning to speak the words. I think we take for granted how much hearing plays a role in speak. I can't even imagine learning a different language having never heard it before. So that explains everything. And as I say before, I was saying earlier that I assumed you'd lost your hearing later in life because you could speak, but there we go. It just goes to show, doesn't it? So I assume then, therefore, major adjustments must have been made. You must have to make major adjustments, on a day-to-day basis to manage your day work. So how do you, so when you're at work, how do you generally communicate? Because, not many people can do sign language. So what do you do to sort of communicate with people on a day-to-day basis?
It was a very tough journey to overcome the difficulty because of my deafness. I always take a notebook with me so I can understand everybody. Today, we have this fabulous technology to make life a lot easier for me.
Yeah, I assumed you probably embrace technology. And to be fair, we all need it in our day-to-day life. Like, if you think about any of us doing our job, if someone took away our use of technology, we would all struggle, hearing aside or deafness aside. If someone took away technology, because I can imagine people's first response to talking to someone like Spencer is, well, yeah, you say you use technology, but if you haven't got Messenger or WhatsApp to message their head housekeeper about something, then what? But we would all struggle if we didn't have the use of technology in our day-to-day work. And actually, if we probably think about it, there's probably many days we at work or house managers at work can go through a day and not see many other staff and communicate purely on email or phone or WhatsApp or whatever. So I think we probably all use technology way more than we think we do. Not surprising. I'm glad it's there. I'm glad it's evolved the way it has to really help people like you. So moving on then. So you obviously used to work in advertising. And then, I've sort of seen your CV and I spoke to you before, and I know that you've then did a really good 10-year stint with one household as a house manager. So how did that role first come about? How did you get that position? How did you find out about it? How did you interview it? So yeah, how did you get into the private sector?
I was extremely lucky because when my sister got married, she invited some of her old school friends to the wedding. At the wedding reception, one of the table that one of her old school friends was the mother, very well-known mother, and I approached her, we sat down and we talked for hours about her life and her children. And we exchanged numbers for me to keep in touch with the children, one of the children. And a few weeks later, I was invited to play a game of tennis in a pop place in London. We played and he won. Then he invited me for a dinner at the Tower Bridge. We talked for hours. Because of his busy timetable, because of his work, he was looking for a house manager for his property. So I offered my executive while he was looking for a house manager, and because there's trust in the relationship, so he gave me the master key so I can look after his property to make sure the interior is clean, nice and tidy. I can collect the mail, I take the call, so I give him a bit of a peace of mind. And then 4 weeks later, after he returned back from Europe, I had a message on my pager telling me that he was active by work as a house manager at the full time. I replied by fax machine to say yes, I accept his offer. That's how I got myself as a house manager.
You've got to love a bit of luck, I think all of us at some point in their career owes a little bit to Lady Luck. It's also all about contacts. I think so many people have said before, if you didn't come through the usual hospitality route and then transition to the private sector, it's generally through someone you know. And it's through someone you know. They know you, they know what you're capable of, and they sort of bring you into the private sector. I love this at wedding as well. Wow, it's amazing the amount of contacts you can make at a wedding, providing you sat on a good table with good people and there's plenty of wine flowing. So it's twofold, really. Yeah, it is good contacts, and it's, you know, it's great that they sort of saw something in you, and you had that 4-week trial while they were looking for somebody, which gave you the opportunity to prove yourself. And then, you know, earned the position, earned the offer, but also good for you for, you know, giving it a chance. You know, it's an industry that you didn't know much about, and, you know, it took a lot of bravery, again, completely deafness aside. I think for many people who were in work doing something else, completely different sector, if they met somebody who said, do you want to come do this for me? And they've never heard of it or done it before, it's a bit of a bold step. So it takes courage on your side, as well as, you know, the opportunity being provided on their side. And yeah, it just goes to show contacts. I get asked all the time how to get into the sector, what do I do, how to get in. And I think it's a common response from a lot of people already in the sector is contacts, network contacts, speak to people, impress people. You want people to warm to you, you want people to like you, make yourself available, make yourself liked. People don't think that that's possible. You don't have to be somebody else, but you can definitely make yourself liked. Yeah, put yourself out there, really, and take these chances. So absolutely good for you. And it obviously sort of worked out well. And obviously, I know that we've spoke before, and I know it worked particularly well because the principal wasn't necessarily in residence the whole time, but we get that a lot as well. But there's households out there where the principal and the family don't even use the house that much. So what does it matter if your house manager doesn't hear? Like, yeah, it just starts to make things seem so obvious. So you spent 10 years in this position as a sort of house manager. Tell us a bit more about what you were doing in the role.
On my first day as a house manager, I was invited to meet an individual for breakfast at the Fortnum and Mason. When I got there, the breakfast laid on the table with a nice smoked salmon on bacon with chive on there. We cooked everything, including more details about his properties, about his staff, about his requests, and he also needs to understand about my difficulty because of the telephone, because of the communication, and he has had no problem with me. So it's a learning curve for me to understand how house manager work.
Yeah, it's always going to be a learning curve, isn't it? I think for anyone that sort of first comes into the role. But nice that he was able to sort of spend so much time with you at the beginning and sort of talk you through. I know that we've talked previously, and I know that, you know, your role was a very typical house manager role, wasn't it? You were responsible for multiple members of staff, the housekeeping team. I know that you did quite a lot of driving for his son. You organised many sort of dinner parties and events on the premises. You would do lots and lots of concierge. I know you took care of his cars, his art collection. He had a wine collection that you managed. He had a cigar collection. So, you know, obviously we've talked a little bit about your role before, and for those sort of listening, your role very much was a house manager role, very sort of typical. The principal wasn't in residence the whole time, but there were other members of staff that you were responsible for. So very sort of, you know, standard house manager role that you were just thrown in the deep end with, really, and obviously managed it. So what was it you enjoyed about this position?
What do I enjoy about this position is getting a lot of requests every single day from the demanding individual to help me to become more proactive with my job. So I'm always on the go, and I'm like an octopus with too many things to do at one time. So that is what I enjoy the most.
Yeah, I reckon that's the most common answer I get when I ask people, what is it you love about working as a house manager? I think majority of people say the variety and the pace. No day's the same. There's a million things to do at any one time. Days fly by. You walk around the house at 10 in the morning and you don't get back to your office till 5 in the afternoon, even though you were only meant to be doing a 20-minute whiz round. So yeah, I think that's a really sort of common theme. So what are some of the sort of challenges? I know I whizzed through some of the stuff that you did, that you do in your role. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the things that you do in your role?
My main challenge are multiple requests from an individual guest, family and client. I organise a dinner party, function or private event at a heat property or at the McKinnon Show Records. I took care of all of the fine arts, watches, jewellery, wardrobe, took care of his collector cars, supercars, and I oversee his staff to ensure their responsibility and task, and I oversee the properties, including project management, to ensure that everything has get on the criteria from the individual.
Busy role then. Yeah, I think I flipped you to it a bit because I did run through some of the things early, didn't I? So, yeah, nice, busy, varied role. It's what we all sort of love about this industry, isn't it? That million things to be doing and such a variety of things to be doing. So you obviously did this role for 10 years then. And what we haven't touched on is is that obviously I know that you then left the private sector. Not out of choice. You were frantically looking for something else, and you ended up. You worked within Polo, didn't you, for a bit, and then you've worked in the hotel sector for ages. So, just for everyone else's benefit, he's worked in 5-star hotels and 4-star hotels, working back of house and then being promoted through to front of house up to sort of head concierge in 4- and 5-star hotels. Just goes to show he's not been held back, have you? You've not been held back at all. So tell us a little bit about leaving this position and what happened next for you. How did you sort of get into the hotel sector following this 10-year house manager position?
After he sold the property and moved overseas, I've applied to every agency in London and elsewhere as a house manager. But even though there are a lot of vacancies for a house manager on the internet, but nothing happened. So after several months later, I gave up and I approached to my local and if they're going to work. And luckily, I happened to have a connection with the Polo Wars. So I managed to get my foot into the polo industry to work with the polo patron and polo players and learn about their industry to transport from one place to another, to glue me, mucking out the stable to make sure that the horses have been out for a run as part of their exercise, and me for the Argentina crew. So, for a few months later, there was one of the polo matches going on, part of this polo season, and I was driving along and there was a massive billboard outside the property converted to a 5-star hotel, and I thought that could be the opportunity for me to break into the hotel industry, for me to progress myself further, because I've had no luck getting into the private household. So I applied, got the interview, got the job as a back-of-house room for 2 years, and it gave me the perk of progression. And then I want to put myself forward to work at the front of house, but again, it's very, very competitive. So, in the hospitality industry, it's very small. It's the same with the private sector. It's also very small. And I was lucky. I was approached by another 5-star hotel in Barcelona for front of house concierge, which is what I really enjoy. And I applied, went through an interview and got the job for a short period of time. And I really enjoy it. It gave me the knowledge, the skills, and the experience. And then from that point, and I worked with several private houses. And then one of my family came to me that there's a vacancy in one of their ministry newspaper. They are looking for a head concierge at the 4-star hotel in Somerset. So I thought, it's great work for me, but I'm not in the ministry. So I dropped an email to explain my position, my experience working with the house manager for 10 years, and luckily I've been offered for an interview, and I met with the principal of the company, which is magnificent, and got the job. And it was one of the best experiences I've ever come across, because I met a lot of VIP, a lot of high net worth, a lot of private clients, and I even organised a private helicopter from the hotel to Glasgow for their guests. And I was given a business card for me to be part of his private corporate concierge company in Oxfordshire at the 12th month. So that was a perk of opportunity. So that is the story of how I've become involved with hospitality. Then I went off to work for a private concierge company.
And what a testament to you as well to be headhunted like that in a role. So you're doing your role, you're head concierge, you've got an ultra high net worth, you've organised them a helicopter and he gives you his business card. So again, to those people listening, like you just, well, not even to do with deafness. I say this all the time, like it's so difficult to interview someone and assess them based on interview. I've always felt the interview process is quite flawed, and I've always thought it'd be much better if I could just like go away for the weekend with someone and do something, do an activity, go out for dinner, have some drinks. I would then know by the end of that day whether I want to hire them or not. It's so difficult in like a 1-hour interview asking a few formal questions like what that person's really like. But you get someone in the role and that's when you can sort of see how they are and doing well. And again, testament to you, Spence, for being headhunted to go work for a private corporate concierge company from a client that came and stayed at the hotel. So great opportunity, and again, good for you for sort of taking it. Just another string to your bow, isn't it? So that's when you sort of left and you went over. I know that you did then return, and you've spent the last sort of couple of years working for the De Vere Group. I want to talk a little bit more about your communication then. So tell us a little bit more about how you generally sort of communicate with larger teams, because obviously when you're in a private household, you're working with smaller teams, so you're more communicating on a one-on-one basis. But I know that when you've worked in hotels, you've managed like very large housekeeping teams and very large kitchen teams. What method of communication do you use most when communicating with the larger teams?
Today, I have been using LinkedIn methodology to keep in touch with my colleagues, staff and directors, because of the area I'm working is a very rural place, and it doesn't work for a group method server because of the signal can be very poor. But I was very grateful that they've allowed me, because of my deafness, to engage with a larger group of people using their smartphone technology. But I usually use to make the service, but now everything's on Wi-Fi, which is much easier, quicker and reliable.
Oh, yeah, good for you. To be fair, I think a lot of people, I think a lot of households struggle with Signal anyway. So for anyone that didn't understand that, he uses LinkedIn Messenger to speak to his colleagues, and his employers is very rural where he works. So with the DeVere group, very rural, so the sort of signal drops in and out. So using things like WhatsApp and stuff and text messages often doesn't work. But LinkedIn Messenger and using Wi-Fi and using smartphones, his employers hasn't got a problem with staff having their phones on them if it means they can talk to Spencer. I know that some hotels obviously are quite funny about having your phone on you, but if they can ping on LinkedIn and get messages through via Wi-Fi, then again, perfect way. And it just goes to show again, doesn't it? Like, of course you can communicate. And I can imagine big private households, even in London, struggle with signal issues. You've got housekeepers down in basements or down in laundry rooms. You've got multiple floors over a big space. Signal, you often anyway can't talk to your staff face to face in a property that's so big anyway. So I can imagine a lot of people communicate with their staff using their phone, even if they can hear. So again, just goes to show it's not the problem of the hearing person; they haven't got to figure it out. It's the problem of the deaf person, and you know the best way to communicate with people, and you just implement it. So makes perfect sense. So you've had a really successful career, and you've managed to do various different things and sort of move around a little bit. But have you felt that your disability has held you back when it comes to applying for roles? Sort of specific, especially specific roles in the private sector. Have you felt held back by your disability at all?
Yes, the answer is yes. Nothing new. And it's not just about my deafness. Everyone is going through the same boat as me, and I've applied. I got house manager one time, nothing happened. I've applied to be a scale, nothing happened. I've applied to work as an event manager, nothing happened. And again, I can't think of a better word for this, but nothing new. It's been going on for the last 70, 80 years, and sadly, and that is the reality of it.
So let's talk a little bit more about the actual interview process then. So excuse my ignorance, but how does it actually work if somebody wants to interview you? And that's probably what people are listening to now. How do you even get the ball rolling? How do you reach out? Obviously, email's fine, but you're going to have an interview at some point. So how is the interview process? How does that work for you? What's the best way for that to be managed?
If I've been invited for a telephone interview, I always reply to find out if I can have a video call interview or correspondence by email. If I get the response back from the same person wanting to speak to me on the telephone first, then they should know about the Equality Act 2010. Doesn't matter what grade they've got, doesn't matter what degree they have, whether it's from a GRPG or OSD, they should be made aware that they have to make an reasonable judgment. If a person requests anything, whether it's a video call or correspondence by email, because if I put down, okay, I am deaf, it doesn't matter what position I'm applying for, whether it's a house manager, PA, event manager, sales or HR, they see the word deaf. It's true from the other end, thinking, oh, deaf, he cannot talk, he cannot hear, it's all about attitudes. and this person cannot judge a good person by cover. So again, I've had been through a lot of time for the past 20, 30 years, and now this has to stop because diversity and inclusion is a hot topic at the moment, and we are going through a massive changing.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Diversity and inclusion is a hot topic right now, and you're right. The Equality Act is in place to protect sort of people like you, and also actually, I think people are going to come out of this COVID pandemic working in a way that's really going to sort of help you anyway, because I think so many people are now embracing use of video when it comes to interview. First stage, second stage, then go meet the principal in person. So that's perfect for you. You don't need to be having phone interviews and all the rest. So I agree with you. I think that if you're invited to interview, a video interview is often a first stage interview now anyway. And if it's not and they want to talk to you on the phone and they won't do a video interview, then, like you say, it's not a fair way of being treated, really. We spoke before on video, you and me, and we speak real time. There's no delay. I understand you perfectly. You understand me perfectly. You can definitely have a very normal interview with you on a Zoom, on a Google Meets, as long as you're using a video platform where the subtitles are provided for you. And then when you go meet a principal in person, once you're in person, it's absolutely fine to manage the interview process because things can be written down, you can then speak back, etc. So I think that, I think we need to make sort of considerations like this. And as I said before, I think actually, video is used so much more now anyway. It's so much more normal to be using video. So I'm hoping that sort of barrier, even just getting through to interview stage, is lowered a little bit for you as we come out of this pandemic. So moving on a little bit then, so you've been working in hotels for a while now. I know that you work for the DeVere Group at the moment in a leadership position, and I know that you've been on furlough, so it's obviously great that the scheme's been there to sort of look after you. Obviously through our conversations, whilst I know you've enjoyed the hotel industry and I know that you're very grateful for the furlough scheme you've been on, I'm also very aware that you are at this stage very keen to move back into the private sector. So why is that? Why now are you wanting to move back into the private sector? What is it that you've missed?
I missed the job title because when I was working as a house manager, I had something I could be proud of, and I was working extremely long hours, but the salary was far greater than I expected, and I also enjoyed the culture with the individual who oversees his property, staff, and his requests. That is what I miss the most. Whereas the hotel industry is totally opposite.
That's fair enough, isn't it? I think, especially, you've done your 10 years in the private sector. You've been out of the private sector, for a number of years now. I think it's quite normal to have gone and gained your experience elsewhere. They've sort of come back. So, what is it in particular to anyone listening that might be recruiting? What in particular is it looking for? What role are you wanting to go back to a house manager position, or is there another position in the private sector that you are also looking at right now?
I didn't realise that I want to become a personal addiction because I have got a lot of experience in my time in the past working with the private sector and also working for the hospitality industry, and I personally feel that I would like to have some kind of closure with the individual. I get the request of the need from someone, but although I would like to go back into a house manager, but I personally feel that I should step on board to allow myself to work on it in order for me to become a chief of staff. I mean, the chief of staff needs to have someone with more than 25 or 30 odd years with a private household. Well, I haven't. So I would like to progress myself to that level as a PA of the CEO or the director or the principal. And that would be some kind of a dream.
So if anyone's looking for a private PA, there we are. I think it's really transferable, house manager. I think a house manager often has a lot of PA duties, and a PA, depending on the size of the house, depending on how the family's structured, can be doing some house management stuff as well. So I think that's a really sort of natural, normal sort of sidestep. So good for you. Yeah, anyone sort of looking for a house manager, especially with PA duties or a private PA, and you'd consider a candidate like Spencer, please do reach out. So, okay, so just sort of wrap up then. So obviously we've been through a pandemic. We've talked a lot about, between you and me, about sort of how the pandemic's affected you. And actually, I know, I'll let you explain in a minute, but I know that it's not actually affected you massively at all. Obviously, from a work point of view, you've been furloughed and at home. But I suppose from a hearing point of view, you've been cut off from the world in terms of hearing communication for your whole life anyway. So I suppose it's given us all a glimpse into your life, really, you know, not having the noise all around us and being in the big bustling sort of scenes all the time. So how has COVID affected you over the last 12 months, and sort of what have you done to keep busy? You're looking forward to getting to work, etc.
Coronavirus hasn't affected me at all. Why? Because I have been living in a silent world for a very long time because of my deafness. And I have lived without sound around me. Although I'm very hearing, but it doesn't mean I can hear everything. I can hear them from the aura. And I have to learn to keep myself positive all the time, because that's why I always work, whether it's a volunteer or some gardening work or helping friends or family. It's all work. You're working with your job to make sure you're on top of everything. So what I've been doing is I have completed my diversity inclusion with the STEER network, and I part with the flying colour, which I'm very proud of. And I've also support and help an entrepreneur from Sri Lanka with his startup company from day one, and now he's doing extremely well, and he's getting himself heard across the global, and he's trying to get capital for his company, which I cannot wait to hear. Something very exciting for him, which I'm very proud of. I'm actually a rep for the local truck in Hampshire to support disabled carers and patrons to make sure they have the right needs, the right support when they go to the hospital. Again, it's something for me to understand the social care on a volunteer basis. And I'm also doing a financial crime risk course with the International Compliance Association, because I have been doing a verification specialist during my time for 5 years, and something I'm very enthusiastic about it. So maybe I could be a compliance officer, because there's a lot of money laundering going on around the world. So again, I never stop working. I enjoy what I'm doing, and I'm doing some gardening. So again, it's part of my well-being. So I need to make sure that I keep the garden nice and clean and tidy. It's all about hygiene. It's all about making it look nice for the summer. So I'm very proud of myself, and I have something positive ahead of me.
Talk about keeping busy. What a variety of stuff you've been doing. Gardening, good for you. We've been trying to get our garden sorted, to be honest, because now the weather's nice. Lots of gardening, good for the soul. But also done some other really cool stuff. Working as the volunteer with the startup company in Sri Lanka with your friend, that's ace that's done so well, and really great that your friends had you there to help with. For anyone that doesn't understand, the peer pressure group that you've been working with in Hampshire, that's a cool thing to have done. Love that you've done the diversity and inclusion course. Love that you're also doing the financial crime risk course. Like, what a mixed bag of, training and, home stuff as well. So, sounds like you've managed to keep yourself in a really sort of positive, mental health state, which is obviously really lovely to hear. And I'm hearing that quite a lot, especially coming out of the pandemic now. I think a lot of people are, especially the last few weeks, knowing the end's in sight, have been feeling a lot more positive about things and actually using the time wisely. Honestly, I can imagine, give it a year or two, I can imagine myself saying, I'd love another lockdown for a month, think of what I could get done. So trying to make I know it's been a very difficult time, but trying to make the most of these last few weeks to get done. We're not going to get this opportunity again, so good for you for keeping so busy. So what does the future hold for you then? So what's your sort of like plan, 5-10 years, where you want to be, what you want to be doing?
At the moment, nobody knows what could happen in the 5-10 year time. However, I have a core vision of what I want to be, because I'm doing my course with international compliance association. But again, I want to double check that there is a need for this specific course that I'm doing. For the private sector, I know there will be more jobs in the 3, 4, 5 month time. Now family, car network, alcohol network, I need more people for housekeepers, chef, butler, safer, and many more. But I would like to set my first as a personal addiction, because it's more about a closer with the individual, and I have got the knowledge, skills and experience when I was working for the private sector and the hotel industry. So house manager is something I enjoy, but I rather want to do personal addiction. And I also like to look into scale HR, because it's like a combination of one. So if you actually recruited for the household, or you actually look at the scale, it doesn't matter if it's a cost or probably property, could education. It's all about combination to one. So yeah, that's me.
Okay, cool, good for you. So I need to wrap this up really, but just before we finish, I found this super interesting. It just goes to show that it's not that big of a deal. It can work really well, and I hope that other people have, felt that this insight has been quite useful. And it's not even, I don't even want to patronise you. Deafness aside, you've had a really successful career in the private sector. We should be celebrating that and sharing your story. But the fact that you've done that all deaf, it just makes me feel like an idiot for moaning about stupid little things in my life. And, people let things hold them back all the time, blame things or, have excuses for why they've not done stuff. And you hear your story and it just sort of is embarrassing really, isn't it? That like some of the excuses that we've used to not do things, or some of the excuses we've had for not succeeding in certain areas, we need to go over it really and just appreciate that other people have much bigger obstacles than we do. So thank you very much for sort of joining us and sharing that with us. So just before we finish, do you have any parting words to anyone that might be listening who is potentially looking for a new member of staff and haven't considered a deaf person or wouldn't consider a deaf person? Is there any sort of final parting words that you'd like to say before we wrap up?
That is a brilliant question. Number one, attitude is everything. Number two, ghost John, a deaf person by cover. Number three, ghost assume you know a lot about a deaf person. Number 4, everyone is different. And number 5, please be aware of the Equality Act 2010 law. There are plenty of support from the Department of Work and Pensions to support people like me at the workplace. Thank you.
Well, there we go. Wrapped it up perfectly. So I hope you've all enjoyed the episode. Thank you so much, Spencer, for coming on and sharing your story with us. I hope that that was easy to understand for everybody. I hope that it was all clear. As I say, go and watch it on YouTube with the captions. If there's any parts of it that weren't clear, please do feel free to reach out to Spencer. As I say, we're going to, as we do everybody, we'll tag him in all of our posts. So any questions you've got, do reach out. And I suppose the sort of takeaway from this is, let's sort of, all open our eyes a little bit to how much more inclusive we could be as an industry than we currently are. I certainly was, even though I grew up in the deaf community and very familiar with just deaf people in general, I think before talking to Spencer, I was probably fairly ignorant as to how a deaf person would work in the private sector. But I've learnt a lot, and definitely I'm going to view candidates like Spencer very differently moving forward. Please do feedback your thoughts on this episode, everybody. If anyone's in a position to help Spencer get back into the private sector, have a position for him, then again, you can sort of reach out to me, reach out to him. But other than that, I hope you've all enjoyed it. I will see you all back here in a couple of weeks for our next episode. If you want to get in touch with me, you can message me on LinkedIn. You can email me at philippa@silverswanrecruitment.com. And then finally, as always, if we can help you find a job or help you find staff, please come and visit us at our agency, Silver Swan Recruitment. And I'll see you all in a couple of weeks. Thanks, everybody.